Good morning, everybody. It's March 18th, 2026. This is the Technical Advisory Committee meeting for the implementation of Senate Bill 25-002. We are here with our Technical Advisory Committee, and we are going to take a look at where we are on our red line on our administrative rules and start wrapping this thing up. We do have a couple of special guests. One is Tyler Jekyll. Tyler is the new Division of Housing Director, and the other will be Maria DeCambra, the Director for the Department of Local Affairs. Once they come in, they've got a couple of things they'd like to say, and then we will stop and introduce them. Meanwhile, I'm going to work through some of the housekeeping items for the Technical Advisory Committee and any of the other guests that may have joined. So we'll talk a little bit about the agenda for the day. Again, welcome, ground rules for the public, resources. We'll review and finalize administrative rules, the regional design criteria table, and we want to go through those TAC recommended amendments that we started briefing at the last TAC meeting. Shums Coda may give us an update closer to the end, and then we'll wrap this thing up. So for the members of the public, we do appreciate you being here. You are an important part of this process as we move forward. Your comments are very important. We recommend that you type your questions into the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to speak. I will give priority to Technical Advisory Committee members just in case because we have limited amount of time to get through what we have to get through. This goes for TAC also. If any members of the public or TAC members have any written comments they'd like to send us, send them to sam.albrecht@state.co.us. Our resources for this process is the Senate bill itself, Senate Bill 25-002 that was signed last year. This slide deck has hot links here, and Heather has already put the hot links into the chat. If you want to go straight to those, you can look at those. They will also be, the slide deck will be published with the recording moving forward. I have to apologize if my throat's a little gravelly today. I am fighting off a cold to the best of my ability. You may see me stop and take a sip of coffee mid-sentence, or you may see me eating some Hall's Mentho-Lyptus cough drops. But I do apologize. We are driven by Colorado Revised Statutes 2432, 3301 to 3329. You can find those on LexisNexis. Also, with our administrative rules, effective yesterday, Rulemaking 1 is in effect, and those rules are up on our website now with respect to what we made changes for previously with respect to business entities for installers and single exit staircases in certain locations. And then Building Codes and Standards website and Technical Advisory Committee website is also there. This meeting is being recorded, and that Technical Advisory Committee has every meeting we've had since July of last year on this website. So if you want to catch up on any of the recordings, that's a great place to find the information. Our total goal for 002, just to keep it focused here, is to try to simplify the process. We're trying to keep these rules and procedures clean and transparent and easy to follow. It's tough. This document is a long, complex document, but we are trying to make sure that we write in plain language and have those discussions around the administrative rules. All right. With that said, have we?
And Sam, yeah, I think Maria just joined.
Oh, good. Excellent. Maria, welcome. I've introduced you, and I think we'll let you go first, and then we'll jump over to Tyler.
Thank you so much, everyone. I just wanted to really, I'm Maria Camara, I'm the executive director, and I just want to take a couple minutes just to say thanks to everyone. I know this has been a lot of work, and really on behalf of myself and the governor, thanks for all of your volunteer time. We really believe this bill is transformative. I think it's gonna, have an impact for years to come. And, oftentimes when you pass, a bill, it's easier said than done, right? It's really how do you translate it into real world, applicability. And I think we've done just that. So I just want to say thanks to everyone. This is very, very exciting, and I look forward to see, the fruit of all of your labor. But with that, I'll turn it over to Tyler. And then thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. And again, I just want to echo what everything that Maria has said. I mean, it's not an easy ask to have you all spend all of the amount of time that you put into this, but it really goes a long way. And as much as I was saying, it's better to be back in Colorado than DC. I was able to bring up this as an example of how Colorado is really engaged on finding solutions that will really lower the cost of housing and make sure that we're able to bring housing to many communities across Colorado. So really appreciate all of the time. And from what I've been hearing is that you have a resident taskmaster in our very own Donnie, who has really been asking you all to go the extra mile to dive into the many different research and make sure that we have thoughtful kind of conclusions to this. So thank him and all of you for your continued leadership and engagement on all of this. But this is really just a key model of how we're able to really get the on the ground, really important experience to shape policy that will have a very meaningful impact in communities across Colorado. So can't thank you enough on behalf of the Division of Housing and DOLA for the time and effort you put into this, and really looking forward to supporting your work and really making sure that people know the passion, analysis, and really thoughtful approach that you all have taken to make sure that we're getting to a better spot. So again, just thank you, and wanted to make sure you heard that from all of us, because we are very much engaged and really very strong consumers of all of the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Maria. We sure do appreciate you guys taking the time to join us today. These folks have been meeting since July, and then we give them homework assignments, and then we have one-on-ones with them in between some of these meetings. So they have put a ton of volunteer time. I have a background in volunteer management, and this group is just fantastic. They never shrug a task, and they really jump in. And I can't say enough about the team we've put together here, both at the TAC level and also at the staff level with Heather and Michelle both participating, and then of course Donnie being our taskmaster and really diving deep down into the codes and keeping us on track so that we have a fair and level playing field for factory built structures in the state of Colorado. We'll cut Tyler and Maria loose, unless you want to sit through another hour and a half of wonderful building code and administrative rulemaking processes. But again, thank you so much for showing up.
Thank you, Sam.
Definitely take you out, but really appreciate it, and have a really great meeting, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll jump back into the slide deck now. All right, so here we go. Let's talk a little bit about the process here today. So this was scheduled to be our last meeting. I think we may have a couple things that we might not, if we can't get through everything today. And I know we're getting some late comments on that are popping in on some of the rulemaking. So I'm 99% sure we will need to have that 25th meeting next week just to wrap it up. But my goal here in today's meeting is really kind to, since we sent out the draft red line and we sent out the slide deck, which I've tweaked a little bit since then, is to really go through here and say, Rule 1, this is what the main changes that we've made and that we've discussed. Is anybody have any comments or concerns about the red line rules in Rule 1. And if not, then we're going to consider those good, and then we'll go to Rule 2. Then we'll go to Rule 3, 4, and all the way through 12. Some of the rules didn't change much, so my goal is to get a consensus if we can. We don't do roll call votes here. We can if we have to, but we prefer to do consensus. And then anything that comes up that we can't resolve today, we will meet on the 25th, and we will just resolve those issues. Like I said, we did get some other comments. On Monday, we factored those into this slide deck a little bit, so that you know. So there are some changes that we're going to be considering also. And then we got some more comments this morning, and they're going to take a little time to unwrap and sort out. But I think we're really, really close, folks. I can't thank you enough for all the work that you've done. And if everybody's okay with what I've proposed, as far as moving forward today, then that's what we'll do. We're going to give Donnie some time again at the end to look at that final regional design criteria table. We've made some final tweaks, but this is it. No more tweaks after this unless we find something wrong with it. And hopefully we don't have to revisit it on the 25th. But if we have to, we have to. But this is the heart and soul of the Senate bill, was these regional design criteria. And we want to make sure that we've got it right, and we want to make sure that, and I think we do. So with that, we're going to just jump into these slides. So Rule 1, we have updated the authority having jurisdiction. We added a lot of different definitions to help us implement this bill. We talked about definitions for building contractor, which we've done, the certificate of rough inspection. I will caveat that this is not the DFPC, Colorado Fire Prevention and Control CORI. This will be the Division of Housing CORI. And it is just a document that will travel with the structures to say that the fire suppression systems have been installed and inspected along the way once they're closed up behind the walls and get here, right? The emergency response unit, we've finished. Those were some definitions we added that we'd missed before. We added Fire Inspector 2 to be some of the inspection requirements on these fire suppression systems. We've defined it. We've defined the fire suppression system plan reviewer, regional model, and a regional model plan. So we clarified also that regional model and regional model plan excludes HUD code homes. So we also added, since we shared these document with you on Friday, we added the definition of a fire suppression system contractor. Our goal is the statute change clarified the areas of responsibility between the Division of Local Affairs and the Division of Housing and the Denver Fire Prevention and Control. I thought I was sharing slides, Tracy.
You are. I can see him.
Okay.
I can see him.
Tracy, if you're hung up, you may have to jump out and then jump back in. I'm sorry. Yeah, it might just be you. We'll get these slides out to everybody after the meeting too. Just to be clear, the statute did change that responsibility for the installation and construction and completion of a unit for fire suppression system from DFPC to us. DFPC will be starting rulemaking as soon as our rules are approved and published, and they will be taking out their pre-manufactured fire suppression system requirements that they implemented a few years back. And so we are using that as a rough model going forward. on how we're going to do this thing. And so hopefully that aligns with everybody's expectations here. So in a lot of the cases, with regard to fire suppression systems, we're going to require those to be reviewed by a approved, authorized, a qualified fire system plan reviewer. And then for the inspection side, that they use an ICC or NFPA qualified fire inspector too. There still will be some fire suppression systems that are built totally on site. And so we've carried that language through there too. And so this is the slide that just said what I said, transferring it into DOH. We're broadening the credentials to allow out-of-state folks to have more possibilities, as well as in-state folks for fire suppression. We're going to keep that Corey, but we're going to totally redesign it. We're happy to share that with you as we just got the editable version of DFPCs, and we're going to take a stab at getting that done as soon as we can. Plans will have to use a fire suppression system plans examiner, and that Corey must travel with the structure to the installation site. So we added this definition. I think we modified this definition since you saw this on Friday. It's an individual or business entity that offers to undertake, represent itself as being able to undertake or does undertake to sell, lay out, fabricate, install, modify, alter, repair, maintain, or perform maintenance inspections on a fire suppression system. Individuals or businesses installing fire suppression systems in commercial or residential occupancies may hold Division of Housing approved credentials or be registered as a fire suppression system contractor with the Division of Fire Prevention, Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. Any edits, comments, questions, or concerns on Rule 1, which is the definition piece? Okay, as I mentioned before, then we probably will not revisit Rule 1 on the 25th. I appreciate that. And then we're going to keep rocking through the rest of these rules just to make it in the same format, okay? Please don't be bashful. These are your rules, our rules. We want them to work. Rule 2 is kind of the meat of everything that we've been doing. If we get hung up on Rule 2, I may ask to, if there's any problem with kicking it down to the end, we'll jump through some of the other rules just to, again, get consensus on most of that. Rule 2, of course, is the codes and standards. As you know, we bumping up to the 24 ICC code set. We're doing a regional design criteria in Appendix A. We clarified accessibility. We adopted the Wildfire Resiliency Code. We're looking at the 2019 ICC G5 containers as a standard, reference standard. And then we're adopting the International Fire Code with some amendments. And the emergency response unit requirements were also put in there. We didn't make any changes since Friday on that. There is discussion going around on the 26 NEC and when to adopt that. Our rules say that it automatically becomes effective when the state of Colorado electrical board adopts that, which we think will be August. We do know that we have amended a couple things in that NEC. Most of that will carry through except for one thing. And we'll just send out a memo on that one item. I think it had to do with outdoor electrical outlets. I can't, without a major discussion on adopting the 26 NEC now, we're just going to let that take effect when the state of Colorado adopts it. Tim, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I think it'd be helpful, and I don't recall any of the discussions on the 24 package or even going back into the 21, but on which appendices have been adopted or are being proposed to be adopted out of, I guess, more from the IBC and the IRC, which have the number of the appendices. Is there a list there, or can we bring that to the table to verify that that's what you're proposing to do again?
Yeah, so as far as the appendices, Heather, maybe you can bring up the draft rules that we've got. You should be able to share those. Let's roll through those. The only specific appendix I remember adopting will be the 20 and the 24 IRC Appendix M, which is the tiny home amendment or tiny house appendix. Donnie, there's not any other appendices that we've adopted. We've made amendments to those that have carried forward from 21 to 24. And those should have all been in that draft red line, but I don't think we've adopted any other appendices.
The only thing I recall is we adopted sections from the radon mitigation requirement in the IRC, and we're implementing that for IRC structures, and then in some cases IBC structures that they must comply with the materials and installation sections of that appendix. But for the IBC, I don't recall adopting any IBC appendices.
Thank you, Donnie. Tim, does that take care of your question?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We're happy to bring it up if you want to, but I thought Donnie could handle it real quick. All right, cool. Any other questions, comments, concerns on Rule 2? All right, good. We will rock forward we'll move those forward too. Rule 3, the summary of the changes. We're estimating an overall 15% fee increase. There's a different process for that. I have to show the State Housing Board cost comparisons from other states, and we're starting to pull that information. We also added the third-party agency authorization, building general contractor registration, plan filing fees, regional model plans, complaint inspection and audits. And we removed the manufacturer 3-year registration and the inspection agency is now part of the third-party agency fees structure. We didn't make any changes since Friday on that. Any comments, questions, or concerns on Rule 3, which is the fees? Okay. Thank you. Rule 4, we made quite a few changes, and on Rule 4, overall, we moved all the third-party agency requirements into their own rule now. So we also talked about the regional models and regional model plans, the third-party agency plan approvals, and then how that's going to work, and then requirements for working with contractors, procedures for modified structures, audits, requirements for manufacturing structures with fire suppression system. We clarified Rule 4.27, only plans impacted by code changes must be resubmitted to the Division of Housing. And we removed that 3-year registration because that 3-year registration, for those that remember, was a request from manufacturers that they were having to resubmit plans every single year for approval. So we gave them a 3-year. And now, since with the regional model process, that those plans and what we clarified in Rule 4.27, those regional models will be good until we do a code change. We did add a section in this rule since Friday. And so if you guys want to, especially the manufacturers on the phone, want to think about this a little bit, and we can revisit next week, we can certainly do that. But we added 4.39, manufacturers designing structures with fire suppression systems to be installed in plant or on site must submit construction plans that include the fire suppression system for review and approval by the Division of Housing or other division authorized agency. That would be your third-party agencies that are approving the plan sets. Any concerns with this piece of it? Okay. 4.391, manufacturers submitting construction plans that include fire suppression systems must ensure that the authorized third-party agency employs a qualified fire suppression plan reviewer to review the plan. And we put that also in the third-party agency section also. And then 4.40, fire suppression systems installed in plant or on site must be completed by a fire suppression system contractor who either holds Division of Housing approved credentials or is registered as a fire suppression system contractor with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. This is what I mentioned earlier, is allowing more flexibility for our state manufacturers and gives more options for our in-state manufacturers also. Any questions or concerns on this one? I think this is the last. And then 441, the quarry must be completed for all applicable inspections prior to concealment to include rough installation and testing of the fire suppression system. Copy of the quarry must follow the structure to the installation site. And then a little more call out on fire suppression system installed on site, either partially or completely, are classified as OC, on-site construction. For structures that need to have a fire suppression system retrofitted on site, the fire suppression system contractor must submit the design to the Division of Housing or an authorized third-party agency plan reviewer for approval prior to installation. We added this last one here just in case somebody uses a regional model and delivers a unit to a location that doesn't have a fire suppression system, to make sure that we get that fire suppression plan, we get the construction drawings modified and supplemented, and that it follows the same process as it would through the entire, if it was being installed in plant. Any questions on the fire suppression? Dean, you had a comment in there. I got your comments. I did not get them at 4:30 in the morning when you sent them to me. I did look at them very briefly this morning. Happy to have some further discussions. But yes, you may certainly comment on that. Would love to hear your opinion. And Mark, you've got your hand up too. Since Dean, I think, beat you to the queue in the chat, let's hear from Dean first, and then we'll go to Mark.
Yeah, appreciate that, Sam. I just wanted to comment, and again, in the interest of time, I know we got a bunch of stuff to work through here, so I'll try to keep it quick. And you've already got my comments in that email, but kind of big picture question about fire suppression systems. As you read through all the new rulemaking, we have basically two entirely different sets of plans reviewers and inspectors, and there's factory and there's field coordination, so on and so forth. And it just raises the question, in my mind, first and foremost, what has become so special about iron pipe that we need all of this level of coverage, but does it create a significantly more onerous situation for offsite projects than for traditional stick frame projects? And it might be as much a question to the factories on the call than it is to the rest of the group.
Dean, that was and that was your first comment, and I thought it was an excellent discussion point, and I'm glad you brought that up. So the on-site built work, it's not more, it has to follow DFPC requirements. So they have certifications and they have requirements for on-site construction where they are the responsible agency having jurisdiction. And so what we did was took their model and modified it a little bit for modular. To me, it is still a level playing field, but yes, all the on-site construction follows the same exact process, but it can only use Colorado Department of Fire Prevention and Control for using their registered contractors, their registered inspectors, and even their registered sprinkler fitters. That is all very clear for them and how that works. Again, when this first came out, we did hear back from industry that this was kind of tough to do because it basically, they were hearing from local jurisdictions that were saying that they needed to have these people in their plants to have Colorado registrations. And so they were having to pay travel fees for agencies to come out of Colorado to go to do this work in plant. So we have, in my opinion, streamlined the requirements here. And Dean, we'll talk about the rest of your questions. Mark, you had your hand up, but then you may have dropped it. Tim, you've got your hand up now.
Before you go to Tim, though, I would actually like to hear from Mark, because this is something Mark flagged for us a long time ago. And Dean, just so you have the history here and the rest of the TAC members, the Division of Fire Prevention Control, owned all these requirements for site built and modular. They later discovered modular and tried to treat it exactly the same as site built. And so that was their intent all along. But what we started hearing from folks that represented third-party inspection agencies like Mark at the time and others was it just didn't make sense for modular the way the industry is set up. It was creating unnecessary burdens there. And so one of the things we addressed through Senate Bill 2 was to take ownership of all the modular pieces of this, but of course respect what the Division of Fire Prevention and Control is trying to do, which of course is all safety related, but make sure that it was done in a way that was engaging the industry and others that have a better understanding of how modular works. And so that's what we've attempted to do. And so we want to make sure we hear from third parties who are the ones that raise and flag this issue for us, because initially when these requirements were rolled out through the Division of Fire Prevention Control, I'm sure they tried very hard, but they didn't do an effective job of hearing the industry's concerns about how it's being applied for modular. So we're hopeful we've addressed that through this process. But Mark, we'd love to hear if we got it right from your perspective or not.
Well, we don't know if we get it right until we start working it, but you answered part of my question and Sam answered part of it, but I still have a clarification. If I'm doing an out-of-state manufacturer and the sprinkler company is licensed in that state, but contracts with somebody in Colorado to do the completion, because like you said, the travel, the expenses and everything else is astronomical. And that's what we ran into, Mo, as you knew at that time. The other thing is, and not to fault DFPC, they just were not familiar with modular construction at all. They really were unfamiliar with it. But to go back to it, I mean, Sam, basically, since if I use a Texas, this is just an example, a Texas licensed installer down there, my plans are Colorado approved, of course, but I use a licensed installer in Texas, then the work is transferred to Colorado. As long as my Corey and everything is completed, I should be able to do that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because I'm going to get asked that question by about 60 people.
Okay. So we just want to make sure they're using similar requirements as the Texas folks. So we have added every place the Division of Housing approved installer, right, as part of that system contractor, fire suppression system contractor. But yes, that is our intent, that you can use a qualified individual in the state of manufacturer, fill out that Corey, and then any other final test on site can be done because on site as required. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, this clarifies it a bunch, so I can do a lot of explaining, both to the third party that I work, two third parties I work with now, and to the corporate that I work with.
And you mentioned Texas, so I did have a discussion with Robert Lee about this. He pushed back a little bit on saying that we were still pretty strict. but I think he's okay. And then also, I did talk to Colorado Fire Prevention Control, and we have another meeting with them on Monday, but they're in general agreement with our process also. So I think we're in a pretty good shape. Mo, does that answer your question too?
Yes, it does. To Mark's point, we will know more as people start complying with these requirements to see if there are any other issues. But the good news is, if there are any other concerns that come up, it's not working for whatever reason, we can always revisit it through a rulemaking process.
Thank you, Mo. Tim, I'm almost to you. I just want to close that piece just a little bit with the fact that we do have a very extensive communication plan. So once these rules go forward, our meetings don't stop. We want to provide education to all the local fire marshals and fire chiefs of what we're doing. And we want to make sure that DFPC understands what we're doing, and that there is no surprises in the field. I will need to know from manufacturers too, what you need to help us clarify that with your third-party agencies that you're dealing with. Tim, your question, comment?
Yeah, thank you. So with this new 4.42, trying to understand how this would apply to an existing approved structure, manufactured structure that maybe has been sitting on a lot for sale, like a spec unit for a couple of years, or another scenario would be it's been sitting on a lot or on a owned by somebody, and they want to uproot it and move it, and say it's a single family structure that needs a fire sprinkler system in the new jurisdiction where it gets moved to, but say it's got a tag that says 21 and this is, in another 2 years. Then at that point, if it gets moved to, say, just for example, my jurisdiction, Broomfield, where we require the sprinkler, then that we would not be over the fire sprinkler installation that would then, even with a 2 or 3 year old unit, would still have to go back through following this rule. Did that make sense as a question?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tim. And the way I seen it work, and Donnie, you can jump in if you want to, is that if we classify that site, that fire suppression system as on-site construction, and you take a lot model and it's going to move to an area that with it's still a modular unit. It's still under our program until it gets installed, inspected, and the oversight inspection is done. It will follow our rules, and so they may use a fire prevention control, or the local government. If you have inspectors that are fire inspectors too, you could certainly do that as part of that OC inspection process. Donnie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, pretty much anything that's a lot model now, even if it was, let's say it's still built up to July 1st, it's already following the fire prevention and controls requirements that they currently have, right? So until it's installed, it'll still have a quarry with it. There's a possibility that there might be something that's a lot model that's older than that was done prior. But we would just try to do our best to try to work that situation out. As you know, before the OC process, we had AC. So if there was no fire suppression system provided with that unit from the factory, then it would be on the locals to look at it anyway. And then when the OC process came out, anything that was provided as part of the construction or needed to be finished on site as part of the construction of that unit would be listed on that OC item. So we would just follow that process. And then moving forward, just like how we currently do it, as Sam was saying, once the unit has been permanently installed, it shouldn't be moved, right? So we're certifying that unit up to the point of installation and certification of the construction and the installation at that time. If it's moved after the fact, even though it's not supposed to, it's going to be treated as if it was a site-built structure. Like if you built a house on site and then moved it, the jurisdiction who takes that project on next would enforce their own codes. Okay. The only time that would ever go back through the program is if they shipped it back to the manufacturer to be modified at the manufacturer. That'd be the only time that it would have to follow our new process.
And we've run into this. Mo, I saw your hand up and then it came down. And Mark, you've got your hand up again. Thank you. We've worked out these issues where a lot model needs to go to a higher jurisdiction, and we've worked those out as one-off cases where we get an engineering letter saying that it will handle the new snow load. The fire suppression system is just another design criteria that will have to be resolved if there's a lot model going that was built for a jurisdiction, to the address of where that lot is versus where is going to Tim, your area with fire suppression requirements. Mark?
Yeah, Donnie had some really good points. I just still have one question, and this primarily affects one aspect. Temporary classrooms. If they go onto a campus that is fully sprinkled and the classrooms are not sprinkled, and this is a temporary building at that time, are we going to enforce the sprinklers into those buildings, or do we leave it up to the local fire marshal to determine whether fire watches and that kind of stuff is going to be sufficient enough?
Donnie?
Yeah, I was gonna say, just following the process that we currently have, not just in the red lines, but also just the rules that we have in place now. The fire suppression requirement is deferred to the locals on whether or not it's a yes or a no, right? So if the current local does not require the fire suppression and they're allowed to use that structure there without it, then I would say that, we're good there. But if it moves into a jurisdiction that does require it, by our current red line, it still has to comply with that current location's fire suppression requirements. So they either need to retrofit that, or it would need to be have a different structure go to that jurisdiction.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of classrooms moving around from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but most of the time when they build these temporary structures, they're there for quite a few years.
Mo, your hand's back up?
Yeah, I took it down earlier because Donnie addressed what I was going to address. But just to recap and remind folks, these requirements that are now under our rules are up until, as Sam and Donnie articulated, up until we certify the unit. And so that unit, as Donnie pointed out, it gets moved to another jurisdiction and it doesn't come back through our program. In other words, it doesn't get moved to a plant, right, to be retrofitted and changed or whatever, to then be compliant with that new jurisdiction. And it's just being simply moved to that jurisdiction. So it goes to Broomfield, shows up in Broomfield, Tim. At that point, it's up to the local government to determine what requirements need to be put in place and whatever the fire suppression, inspection, all that stuff. So it's outside of our hands, basically. But the other thing it reminded me of is, because this came up in our conversations with Division of Fire Prevention Control, is any requirements for like maintenance and revisiting of these products, of these fire suppression systems, once a unit has been certified, also is outside of our jurisdiction. We are up into that point of certifying, so that structure for the first time, that's us. Anything after that is local government, other departments, etc.
Thank you, Mo. That's important. All right. Anything else on this discussion? We added clarification on the inspection here. We also added, as mentioned before, assembled and tested or tested on site. I didn't want to roll through that too fast. The quarry must have all rough and final inspections, and to include required tests before certification of the structure. Any questions, concerns here? And Dean, I know you had some other questions that I need to read and digest, and then we can discuss those. I'm not ruling out any changes on the 25th, but let's see if we can give me some time to think on those, and I'll circle back with you, Dean. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sam.
You bet. And then I think you also, Dean, had questions on 5, 7, and 10. So feel free to jump in and bring those up. And again, we'll work through those. Third-party agencies is a new rule, Rule 5. We've worked through those. We've added eligibility, functions, authorization, audits, specific requirements for fire suppression system plan reviewers and inspectors. And we've talked about all that. Any questions on Rule 5 with respect to third-party agencies? Okay. Thank you. Rule 6, building contractors. We've worked out the eligibility, registration, responsibilities, education, and audits. Any
Record your name and reason for calling. I'll see if this person is available.
all right, and then so Rule 6 with building contractors, we added one thing since Friday. We wanted to clarify that the building contractors, that the subs, including electricians, plumbers, electricians, fire suppression system contractors, and other construction trades, are not considered building contractors unless they are overseeing the prep of an installation site or on-site construction to complete a factory-built structure. If these trades are contracted to oversee the project, then they must be registered as a building contract with the Division of Housing if the local building department does not issue a building contractor license. So we wanted to make sure that since we defined a fire suppression system contractor, that is not a building contractor as we have defined it, unless they are overseeing all the OC and work. Okay. This was just to clarify the double use of the word contractor. Any questions there? All right. 612, Sean, this was to address some of your questions regarding can homeowners act as building contractors? The answer is yes. That we allow the homeowners to do their own installations. They have to, for an homeowner installation, they have to follow our rules and notify the division that they are doing that piece. They can also serve as a building contractor if they follow our rules and notify the division. So we added, basically put in the same guardrails there as for the installers. Donnie, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, just real quick. Do you, this to everybody, should we clarify maybe a certain amount of
we did right here, Donnie. This is the continuation of the rule. A homeowner is limited to performing site prep or on-site construction work for one factory-built structure in a 12-month period.
Thank you.
Heather and I were one step ahead of you last night. All right. Any questions on that? Now we also added, let me just pause. Any questions on that? Okay. We also added throughout the document that if manufacturers, installers, and sellers must notify the division of any building contractors who attempt to operate without the necessary credentials. We just need to know if, and here's why. We've tried to notify and everybody in the building contractor industry of these requirements. We just want to know if there are people out there operating. You shouldn't be letting folks like this operate. It's going to be a very easy process to get registered with for qualified individuals to be able to get to the program and get that contractor education requirement met, whether they're homeowners or whether they're other building contractors that we just have failed to notify. So it's just to me, it's just a safeguard that we're everybody's following the rules here, right? All right, and then homeowner acting as a building contractor. Yeah, we did this. Sorry. Any edits, comments, or concerns on building contractors? Sean, you got your hand up?
Yeah, Sam. So sellers and building contractors and installers are required to. It's kind of a gray area. So if we all kind of operate a little bit separately, but together, if a homeowner is hiring a contractor or a contractor's doing the work, and we get to a point of, or somebody switches. Are we just to notify the Division of Housing or your group, or do we refuse to install the home, or what is our ability to, kind of respond to our requirements there?
I think you notify us, and I think we try to get them licensed or registered, or get them to take the contractor education on a one-off base. To me, it's like we can write the rules as specific as possible, but some of these things, I'm not sure we can guess every scenario. There is certain, we have enforcement authority over building contractors that are not licensed or not registered with us or licensed by the local government. And I think it's part of that education and outreach where we can, that we really start notifying folks that this is a requirement, and that it will be reaching out to the manufacturers, the sellers, and the everybody else just to make sure that they know this is a new requirement. Lisa Marie, you asked about when we can start applying for building contractor certification. 1 July, these rules take effect, and we will have that process in place. Donnie?
Yeah, just real quick for the homeowner contractor, do we need to clarify whether or not they can hire certain trades to work for them, or is this an allowance to say that they can do their own work on their home?
They can hire their own trades. I don't see that as a problem. If they're going to act as the building contractor and they've notified us, then they're going to have to follow, they're going to have to take our education, and then they're going to be the responsible party as that building contractor.
But the homeowner's not required to register as a contractor, right? So if it's not required to register, then they're not. I would assume not required to do the education.
Well, we could make them required to do the education. That's fairly easy, I think. Mo, you've got your hand up. You got some thoughts on this?
I do, but I think we can talk about that offline. I actually wanted to respond to what you said in response to Lisa Marie. I would recommend that we roll out that application process before the rules are in effect, because once the rules are in effect, that means those requirements are in effect, right? That means anyone potentially operating outside of that is in violation. So we want those contractors who want to register with us to apply sooner, and so we can issue those registrations in time to be in compliance with the requirements when they are effective on June 30th. So you and Donnie actually need to start this process sooner than that and have that application rolled out before then.
Understood. I like that plan too. So we'll probably try to get that done early May. Donnie, we can work some more on the requirements for homeowners doing building contractor work, but I don't see that as a huge problem going forward. Okay. Any other thoughts on Rule 6? Rule 7, we've talked through this, clarifies the responsibility and coordination, both jurisdictional authority, codes and fees, licensing and post oversight inspection changes. We've worked through all those things, and we haven't made any changes since Friday. Does Anybody have any concerns on the local government side? Dean?
Sorry, this is chapter 7. I had some comments in, but I don't know that it's necessarily these specific items. Do you want me to raise those now, or?
You can. Oh, yeah. So there was one of your comments was on 7.4, and local sustainability requirements are not construction codes or design standards. So we've seen local jurisdictions adopt sustainability requirements. The example that I remember specifically was that you had to meet sustainability requirements or pay more for your permit. It was tied to a permit fee, but there's certainly not construction codes or design standards that can be enforced as a design criteria tied back to the building codes. Does that make sense, Dean?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I read it, and it read as like, oh, well, then if it's a modular project, we don't have to worry about those requirements.
Well, so the way we settled with this one jurisdiction, it wasn't settled. The way we left it with this one jurisdiction, we left it to the manufacturer. If they wanted to meet the sustainability requirements in order to get a cheaper permit, they could do that. So the locals can enforce permit requirements with respect to sustainability. It's just not a design criteria for the unit.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then 7.10, you mentioned the structure may not be relocated. I think this was.
Yeah, that appears in a couple of different locations. So I was kind of swept it all. 7.10, it reappeared there. And, I mean, my primary comment is, well, under the current situation, we can actually relocate a modular structure. There's a path for that. So it seems like this language is actually barring that in the rulemaking from being able to happen, when in fact it feels like, well, gosh, as a designer, if I could take a recent project that was submitted and approved, and then went back and sort of retroactively said, well, here's the regional design criteria it would comply with. Could we not actually put those mods anywhere they would be allowed to be within the regional design criteria? And the way this is written, it's basically saying, no, you can't do that.
So I think I think you were talking about site-specific designs, or were you talking about relocatable structures?
Basically both, because the structure may not be relocated. Like, again, it occurs, I think, in section 4, 5, and 7. I think I have to go back and look.
Then you talk about it.
We just, wanted to site anywhere I saw site-specific structures may not be.
So once we.
Sorry, what was that?
Once we're responsible for the installation, the oversight of those modular structures on a permanent foundation, then we're pretty much done. If somebody wants to, if it's on a permanent foundation, and somebody wants to move that structure, then they're going to have to work that out with the new local jurisdiction where it's going, right? Or within the same local jurisdiction. If it is a relocatable structure that is going to be moved, it can go to another location unless it needs to be modified. If it needs to be modified, like the discussion we had on fire suppression, then it needs to go to a location where if it's built to 21 and we're now on the 24, we're not going to recertify that unit to the 24 code set. It would have to go back and be modified in a approved manufacturer location. And I think that covers that. Donnie, you've got your hand up.
So I think when your question that you had was for the site specific, and maybe the industry developing these site specific models with the intent that they're going to use those in other locations. That's what you're asking, right?
Right. Or just generally what the path to, changing a location for a constructed module or even a permitted modular design could go.
Okay. So the reason why we put that a site specific is not transferable is because it wouldn't be something that's designed specifically to a region that is prescribed in the table, right? But if you are designing it to meet the requirements of the region, then why not just submit it as a regional model, even though you know where it's going?
Because I'm really referring more to anything like retroactive. There's going to be designs currently in design up to and beyond July that, you know, factories are going to make decisions and say, hey, will this fit in a regional criteria or will it not? Because they're all currently site specific right now in the current state. And
Yeah,
so
so
I just look at that and say, well, geez, we actually have a path that could make it much easier to say, hey, I've got a design that, you know, we did last year, and Fading West wants to use it next year, but put it in a regional design criteria. It's our job then to basically go through that design and say, does this comply? What regional design criteria would this design have fit in had it existed last year? And say, yeah, it actually can go here, here, and here. But if they whether they built that box or even if they previously submitted plans for it, I could see that path actually being utilized pretty robustly within the next year.
I can too, Dean. My recommendation would, if as you go through that process and it meets a set of regional design criteria, submit it as a regional model and get it approved there, and then use it wherever you want. Donnie?
Right. Oh, go ahead, Donnie.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that's what you're saying is you're asking why would we need to resubmit it again if it's already fits those criteria, right? If it's already been.
I mean, I think it's reasonable that it may be resubmitted. I'm just also looking at the scenario that, you know, the current state scenario where we've talked in the past, if somebody designs and permits and builds modules, and for whatever reason the project goes sideways and those modules never get set on those foundations on that site specific site, can we demonstrate that? Can we use this regional design criteria to demonstrate that those modules could be set somewhere else? And right now, as written, it basically bars that because it says site specific module cannot be relocated.
Okay, so I think so. Currently, our current process is, let's say that you built a model for a customer and they ended up backing out of the deal, and then you have somebody else who buys that unit that goes somewhere else. What we do is we just reevaluate the plan and the next location to see if it can fit that location without any modifications, right? But if you wanted to use that same model as a regional model plan, then it would have to be resubmitted for a regional model plan. Because everything up to July 1st is following the old, or up to June 30th is following the old rules, right? Anything after July 1st has to follow the new rules. So anything that's submitted as a regional model plan has to be approved as a regional model plan. And then anything that's site specific has to be approved as site specific. And so we do have a process that we can do. It's just that it makes it, we're making it clear that to make this easier for the regulation part of it and also the design, if you do a site specific model in the future, then it is site specific and not transferable.
And Dean, to answer the question about these units that have already been constructed, we treat those as lot models, and we work with you to figure out where those could go and get a new design professional letter or approval of those. Mo?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and perhaps there's an opportunity here to clarify this in the rules based on, in response to Dean's comments, but really it's I think what it's ultimately getting at is the structure once it's installed, right? So if you submitted for a site-specific design and then that structure is built and installed, that's the intent. It's for that specific site and no other, right? It doesn't mean, as we talked about earlier, if somebody wants to move it, even though it's not supposed to be moved, and they send it back to the plants, right, and reconfigure it to be regional or whatever, to your point, then yeah, we can go through that. But if they move it to another site and it was designed for a different site, then they're up to that local jurisdiction to go through their process, right? But if there are products that haven't been built yet that were originally designed to a site-specific plan, that can always come back through us to be redone, right? To Donnie and Sam's point. And then, of course, if there are structures that are already built to those plans but haven't been installed anywhere, And then same thing, they can revisit that with us, right? It's just once it's designed, built, installed, right, then it's pretty much locked in with some very rare exceptions. I think that's what this is trying to get at ultimately. But if we need to clarify and talk about the different stages, plans that were previously approved, but nothing has been built, plans that were previously approved, things were built but not installed. And then, of course, the third category, plans reviewed, approved, it was built and installed. Those are really three different buckets, right?
Mhm.
And they may be treated differently. So if we need to clarify that, we can run through that and have that conversation. But does this conversation help address your concerns, Dean?
Yeah, I think it does because I don't want the written language in the new rulemaking to have unintended consequences to remove the ability that we have today to work through and say, hey, we got mods here at this location, but if they're going to change location, we know how to do that today. And just the way that it was written in the rulemaking and actually repeated like at least twice, maybe three times throughout the rules, made it look like, now the state rule is that's no longer an option, which I think the intent is that's not what we want to do. So we just want to make the words match the intent.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good flag, Dean. We'll revisit language to provide some clarity there and run it by you.
And
Thank
yeah,
you.
I like that too. We'll take work on that clarity issue, and then of course those units. Anything you have in production with the plans now, or will still can be built to the 21 code set and delivered 180 days after, as long as you've started that design work now. So this kind of ties in with that too. And I know we've got that in the rules someplace. All right. Any other concerns with local government rule? Okay. State agencies, again, clarifies responsibilities and coordination, including factory inspections, utility connection inspections, fire suppression systems, and annual certification inspections and testing requirements. That is specifically what Mo was mentioning before. Once we do the oversight inspection, any fire suppression system requirements for maintenance or testing, including annual inspections, is the responsibility of the local jurisdiction, which may be DFPC in some instances. Any concerns with state agency? Okay, these last few rules don't have sections don't have a lot of changes that we haven't already discussed. So I'm going to walk through them so Donnie we can look at that design table. Sellers, we added working with building contractors and audits. Any concern on the Rule 9 sellers? Okay. Rule 10, installers and inspectors, we added working with building contractors, requirement for fire suppression system installers and inspectors. And that really should say fire suppression system contractors. We took the word installers out of every place except I think this slide. It's fire suppression system contractors that are doing the design and installation for those units. So Rule 10, fire suppression systems installed at an installation site must be installed by a fire suppression system contractor who holds Division of Housing Approval credentials or is registered as a fire suppression system contractor with the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. I think that was the only change in Rule 10. Nope. And then we clarified in plant but completed on site. And that was the only changes we made to Rule 10 since Friday. Any concerns with those? Okay. Rule 11, foundations, really no major changes there. And we may send foundation plans out to third-party agency review and approval. We can do that now with any construction plans also. Any concern on Rule 11 with the foundations? Okay. Rule 12 is just the enforcement. We've added the post-audit enforcement requirements. Our legal team is looking at those. If there's any changes to Rule 12, we will discuss on the 25th. Okay. Well, thank you all for working through that with me. I think the 25th will go very cleanly. But we are also going to reformat everything that we've done to align with the new Secretary of State requirements for accessibility, formatting, and numbering for the Secretary of State's requirements. So the rules that we file on the 31st will be completely compliant, and it doesn't get kicked back to us. It's, as a side note, right as we filed our final rules for rulemaking 1, the same day that we filed them, we got new requirements from the Secretary of State, and Heather and I were sweating a little bit that they wouldn't accept our changes, but we were 99% there, and they went ahead and accepted them, and so we were good with rulemaking 1. But we got to do a better job for rulemaking 2. Okay, regional design criteria. Donnie, you want to jump in here a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So as you can see, the table's not changed a lot. Really just add a little more color to really visually separate the two wind region from the snow regions on the table. I did make one small change to the partial column. The SR5, I had 119, but I relooked at the calcs and it was 120, so I changed that back to 120. But other than that, everything else is the same. But what I wanted to do today, and this might help with a lot of you here, is really how to use the table itself. So I ran through some scenarios with some of the TAC members to, I guess, see what the table, how it's going to be used from different aspects, from the seller standpoint, from the manufacturers, to the designers. And I think that running through those scenarios actually helped out with utilizing the table to really get the best use out of it and trying to really clarify what the numbers are actually showing you. So what I did, if you go to the next slide, Sam, is I got all the data that we know from that SEAC document, and I put them into regions. I don't know if you remember me showing a slide earlier in this process of all the jurisdictions and what regions they fall into. And so what I did is I did that same thing based off this new table. And so I put them in order by the county. Now we're still trying to gather the rest of the information from the local building department, so you have a little more detailed version of this by jurisdiction. But at least as a quick cheat sheet, this will give you a quick answer like, hey, what counties are within certain regions? And so this table shows you all based on the data that we have, and then also just for some additional work that I did, is I tested a couple other places within that county just to see if there's any differences between the data that we have and what is actually there. Now, this isn't 100% accurate. You might find one that might fit within a region less. It was just, based on how the tool works, it depends on where you click is where it's going to give you these site-specific information. So you might have one here, like for Denver, for instance, it says regions 2 to 3, but let's say you find a specific point in Denver where it actually allows you to use a region 1, you would still be able to use that region 1 model in that location. Or if it, let's say, for instance, it says 2 to 3, but you click on location and it actually puts it in a region 4 criteria, then it would have to comply with the region 4. So this is just based on information that I was able to gather from the SEAC document, and then also some test points. And I tried to pick populated cities, but also clicked in areas where you had residential roads that went up close to the mountains or up near a higher elevation. So I try to do what I can to make this as accurate as possible. But again, this isn't 100% accurate, but it is a quick reference to known locations in Colorado and what those regions would be. So just as a walkthrough, what I did is I picked Denver as the example. So if you go to the next slide, Sam. So we know that the regions 2 to 3. And so let's say that you already gone through the approval process. You got the plan approved for, let's say, a region 3 model. And you're like, all right, well, I know that Denver is regions 2 to 3. So when I click on an address in Denver, let's say I know who that customer is, I put in their address. What I did is I put our state office building as an address. Let's just say that's an area where they want to install it. So when you go to the ASE hazard tool, you just make sure that you click in the address, you click the search, and then it'll prompt you to click the requested data information. So just make sure you're on the standard version of the ASE 7-22. Our minimum is risk category 2. So you click the risk category 2 selection in there, and then the load types. Remember the single source of truth, as Dean was mentioning in the last TAC meeting, is going to be the ASE hazard tool. So the ASE hazard tool allows you to click wind, seismic, and snow. Generally speaking, seismic east and west of the mountains are going to be B. There are some A's in there, but we're already saying the minimum is B. Down south, southwest middle section of Colorado is going to be in the C area. And then I think there's some other areas, but generally speaking, if you just select these options on the tool and then click view results. So when you click view results and then go to the next slide, it'll give you all the information that you need, right? So the wind is 107, snow is 55 pounds per square foot, and this is going to be the strength-based or the ultimate ground snow load. And then when you click the details button for the seismic, it'll pop up another little window there, and it'll give you the seismic category for that specific location. So you know if you use a table as prescribed, we're doing minimum B, so for the seismic. So you know that A is less stringent, so you're already exceeding that requirement, so you're good there. Your minimum wind loads is 115 if you designed it to region 1 wind loads, and it says that it's 107, so you're good there, you're exceeding that requirement. And then also for region 3, go ahead and go up to, go to the next slide actually. So region 3, it came back as 55 pounds per square foot for that specific location. And so if it's 55, let's just say it is downtown, but there's not a lot of shade. There's no obstructions, or there's no structures that are casting shade over that structure. You know, that partial, if there's going to be some shade, or there's going to be some kind of obstruction that is casting shadow over that unit, but it's not going to be considered a fully sheltered structure. So throughout the year, there's going to be some sunlight and there's going to be some exposure to the wind. So you know that the partial category, the partial column there, would be your best fit for that specific structure. But since it came back with a 55-pound ground snow load for partial region 2, you know that you can't place a region 2 model there because the maximum ground snow load you can have is a 48-pound ground snow load. But you know that a SR3 has a minimum or the maximum of 72 pounds per square foot for your ground snow load. So you know that the region 3 model is going to be perfect for that specific structure in that specific location. And then down at the bottom left, you'll see that if you design it to the region 1, you're already compliant because the minimum wind load for that location was 107. So as long as you're following the table, and then also, as long as you're following the table and verifying that that design is approved for that location by using the ASE hazard tool, all you're doing is just verifying the information that comes up through that hazard tool and making sure that your design meets or exceeds that data that is pulled up on the tool itself. One thing I forgot to add to this table or the presentation is the calculations of what it actually, the visuals of what it looks like, and why we have to have the 3 columns is because when you do the calculations, I actually have a table that shows ground snow load 1 all the way to 133, right? And you'll see that let's just say, for example, a snow region 3 model, when you plug in the values for the ground snow load, 80 will equal a 60 pound per square foot roof snow load when you're using these factors that are above 1.2, and then for the thermal, and then also for partial or 0.9 or 1.2 for the sheltered and full. So for snow region 380 full with the 1.9 factor, you'll see that the calculations will show a 60 pound roof snow load. But if you try to move that full exposed design to a partial location and still try to install it in an 80 pound ground snow load, you'll see that it's no longer 72 pounds per square foot for the roof snow load. It's actually closer to maybe 75 or 76 pounds, if not higher, for your roof snow load calculations. And then same thing, if you moved it from a full to a fully sheltered, you'll see that the ground snow load of an 80 in a sheltered location puts that roof snow load above 60. So based on the math, you just can't put one structure in all 3 scenarios just because you have to account for more snow being on the roof. So that's why you have the 3 columns here. And then one of the things that we're doing right now, I'm working with Shums Coda on is rules of using the table. And then we also clarify what is a fully exposed building, what is a partially exposed building, and what is a sheltered building. And that is language that is pulled from the ASE 7-22 table. I believe it's 7.3-1 that talks about the exposures. But at the bottom of that table, it gives you a footnote and it defines each one, and it also gives you the calculation just to ensure, like, hey, if you do have an obstruction or another structure that's nearby the site location where you're placing this unit, to distinguish whether or not it's going to be partial or fully exposed. And then talking with the industry and some of the TAC members on the table, sheltered construction is probably going to be the most rare that you're going to come across. But we did want to account for it just so that you knew that if you did run into the situation, that you know what your limitation is for that ground snow load. But based on the numbers, let's just say you went conservative, you designed it to a 72 pound ground snow load for snow region 3, but you sold the structure to a customer who was going to a fully exposed area. We would know that their limitations at 80 pound ground snow load for that specific site. So if we know that's fully exposed and the ground snow load came up to be 76 pounds per square foot for the roof snow load, or for the ground snow load, sorry, that you know that your limit is an 80 pound ground snow load. You just can't, again, you can't move it from partial to another location that that's also partial and has an 80 pound. It just doesn't, the math doesn't work out correctly.
Donnie, I'm going to have to cut you off. We've got 3 minutes here. So on the 25th, we'll finish the discussion on the table. Nothing has changed on this other design criteria. We're clarifying the footnotes as we go through, and we'll get those in front of everybody before the 25th meeting. So we have lots of time to go through those. And what we will also do on the 25th is go through those TAC recommended amendments, including the 100% ice and water shield, the combustion air and gas appliance at 36 inches minimum for across the entire state. And then some other amendments that we've talked to about unvented gas appliances, floor drains, the snow shield barriers, and refrigerant fire rated cooling shafts. Sorry. There's 9 of these that we'll talk about on the 25th. The definition of cabin should be a fairly quick discussion. I'll move it along very timely on the 25th. And then HVAC drain lines for as recommended by Larimer. James Cody, I'm sorry, but I'm only going to give you about a minute. You guys got anything?
No problem, Sam. No, I think you heard from Donnie. We're just in a support role at this point. We're doing analysis on an ad hoc basis based on what the DOH team needs, and providing that back in a timely fashion, hopefully. So we are meeting weekly, and then tapping our contacts in when necessary. So if there's any questions for us, though, we're always happy to answer.
Yep, and we will be briefing this table to, thanks, Andre and James Cody team. We will be briefing this at the April board meeting for CCICC. And we will maybe also be presenting at the general membership meeting, but we're working out those details. Donnie?
I was going to say, I think the meeting ends at 11, so we still have another 30 minutes. If you had anything else.
Thank you, Donnie. I was wondering about the same thing. I was wondering if you had a conflict, Sam. This meeting has 30 more minutes.
Thank you, folks. Okay, then let's go through those.
That'd be great. While we got people, that'd be great.
Yeah, I thought it was 9 to 10:30. I assumed it was an hour and a half. My fault. All right.
So actually, before we jump to this, though,
tape?
before we jump to this, since you did shut Donnie down early and then cut Andre's time down, do you guys have anything else to add today?
The only thing I was going to add was the minimum thermal requirements. If you want to go back to the minimum requirements, Sam.
Yeah, and then we want to see if James Cody has anything else to say too.
Yeah, and this will be quick. So at the bottom of that section of the table, you'll see that the IBC structures have been separated. I'm working with James Cody on that as well, just to there's a little more complication with that specific section of the IBC, or at least the commercial energy provisions. If we did a minimum climate zone 6, it might work for most commercial structures, but the residential section of let me try to clarify that. When you are looking at the commercial section of the IECC for residential buildings that cannot be designed to the residential section of the IECC, the installation values they vary. So I'm gonna work with them to try to see if we can clarify that. But I think for the most part, anything that is going to be exceeding the residential section of the IECC being built to the commercial standards is most likely going to be site built. So what I'm thinking is maybe just generally saying that anything that has to be designed to the commercial sections of the IECC that are residential structures are site specific. But I'll run that through James Cody, and then also I'll reach out to some of you TAC members to get some input on that. But I think that would kind of fix that. And then that way that climate zone 6 would work for all commercial structures, except for those that exceed the residential section of the IECC. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Andre, anything else from you guys?
You know what, Sam, I don't think I need to interrupt your flow. We're working on a couple of things, basically an analysis on potential outliers for design criteria that we'll be getting back to DOH this week. As you heard, we're working in the rule, we're working in the multiple versions of the tables that you've seen in the last couple of months here, so very hands-on in that space. But yeah, I think that about covers it. I don't think I really need to add more unless there are questions.
Any questions for James Cody? You opened yourself up to questions, Andre.
You guys are taking it easy on me today.
Thank you. All right. So let's walk through these amendments. So ice and water shield on 100% of the roof. We heard from manufacturers that they were already doing this for some of these higher snow locations. The questions then, and we did consult with James Cody on this also. It's not required by code, but it's a best practice. And so, although I think we were all in agreement of this, it may be a requirement that the lower elevations or the lower snow loads don't need this as much. Sam, that you mentioned, I think this was something that you guys do in your jurisdiction also. Not putting you on the spot, but do we want any further discussion, or do we want to talk maybe about adopting this 100% ice and water shield, and do we want to tie it to certain elevations or snow load?
I think when you look at the whole state, I don't think it makes as much sense as it does for the mountain regions. It just has a lot to do with ice damming and different things and roof actual having roofs last a while. But that this is one that, I mean, I would hope that our manufacturers and designers would be checking with the local jurisdictions, because as an actual amendment, probably not.
All right. Well, we could tie it, and Mo had a good point. I think we were going to maybe tie it to elevation or snow loads. And what about that as an option? Manufacturers, other building departments, any thoughts on that? Tim?
Yeah, I agree with Mo's statement from our discussion the last meeting, and along with Sam, I don't think that's appropriate to do across the state. But with that being said, to go into maybe set the threshold at an elevation 7,000, whatever the right number is, or higher, where you're going to have the snow, but it wouldn't necessarily be required for every type of roofing material. I mean, I think really along the lines of the only time we've ever really seen that would be with asphalt shingles and not tile roofs or metal roofing. So I'm not sure how you would phrase that in the table with those parameters.
Well, we'd either make it a footnote in the table, or we would amend the IRC and IBC as a amendment to those codes. Donnie, your thoughts?
The only thing that, like I said, it's hard to do it based on elevation alone, just because there are jurisdictions that are 7,000 feet that probably are not as cold as Summit County, right? And then, or also Telluride. So I think some of the discussions that we're having is, maybe basing it on maybe the elevation and the climate zone. If you are truly a climate zone 7, where you are going to be more subject to the ice damming effect. And then also another consideration was the wind speed. It's not just the snow building up on top. It could be if you're in an area where you're in freezing conditions, but you also have high winds, that it would push moisture underneath the shingle or that roofing material, and then cause the ice damming effect as well. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint this, and we're trying to figure out what would be the best way to do this when the code doesn't actually require this, right? This is, again, just a best practice, but how do we implement it as a requirement across the board for the state if you meet these specific requirements? So if there's any input on that, it'd be very helpful with moving forward, at least with this section.
Dean, you've got a question in the chat regarding whether all these amendments, if there's going along the code requirements. Well, as you know, local jurisdictions have certain requirements above and beyond in certain situations. If I go back to the intent of 002, it did not line out snow and water ice barriers or shields with respect to a design criteria to be considered. What we don't want to run into, though, is a regional model that is approved for that meets our design criteria and then isn't permitted by the local building department for whatever reason. Now they can't say no to us, but if they have it in their books, then it gets a little tricky. Mo?
I would respectfully disagree with that comment, Sam. This program owned all the requirements for modular except for certain unique geographic and climatic conditions that are articulated in statute, and they were wind and snow load. There are a few other things that we deferred through rulemaking. Senate Bill 2 has now made it clear all of it is under us, but of course, with stakeholdering and conversations with local governments about what works best. But at the same time, what 002 is attempting to do is deploy something statewide more effectively than what has been happening to present day, right? And so we will continue to have those conversations with local governments and the industry on what will make the most sense. But I disagree with the comment that you made earlier that if Summit County or another jurisdiction made these requirements, that it would apply to modular. It would not. Period.
Yeah, and
And pretty much the last thing we'd want to do is restrict every modular project in the state because of a worst case condition in one jurisdiction, right?
Correct. I think what we were conversing about though was, does it make sense to, identify in certain areas a certain type with certain conditions if certain requirements are then triggered, right? But to apply it to all products, there's just no way. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But if there's no appetite or there's no way to make it work, even for, a regionalized concept for this particular issue that's been raised, then it doesn't make sense to try to do it. But if there's an opportunity here where we can, meet both sides in an effective manner, then let's have that conversation for sure. That's the intent of all of this, right? Talk about it, see what we can do. But if it puts modular at a disadvantage and just creates more problems versus providing solutions, then it's something that should hit the cutting room floor.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the thought on tying this to climate zone and elevation or climate zone? Is that a better route to implement this?
I'm not sure it does. It's very broad and seems overly restrictive to modular or almost punitive to modular over stick frame in some degrees.
I'll ask some of our building departments. Sam, I'm not sure if Don made it today or not. Tim, what do you guys think?
Sorry, I was on the phone answering something. I apologize that I didn't quite catch the specific question for looking for an opinion. I'm sorry.
So yeah, we're trying to decide if this is more onerous for manufactured modular housing or modular units, or if we can tie it to climate zone, wind load, snow load, or elevation in some reasonable manner, or if we need to make it, if it is onerous, if we just say no. It's per what we've currently proposed in the building codes.
Yeah, I'd suggest just following the way the building code, and I know this question comes up quite a bit because is that third bullet point. That language is in both the IRC and IBC. It's where there's history of ice damming, and so I have a particular. I've made a decision for Broomfield, and I believe my neighbor right next door at Westminster has the opposite, at least from previous building official where they have done it. So I think you're all over the board with that. So with that being said, I think from a manufacturer standpoint, it may make sense to put some kind of an amendment clarified into it for your project. So just because that where there's history of ice damming, it doesn't really give you a whole lot of direction for that. Does that make sense as a rambling answer?
Tim, it does make sense. We have always had a requirement for ice and water shield where there is a history of ice damming. I think that's in our current, like I said, it's either in current code or current amendment. Andre, then Donnie.
Thanks, Sam. I'm inclined to agree with Tim and Mo both that when trying to look at this kind of pervasively, this is really difficult to parse out. I think that, to your point, you guys have been putting structures in mountain communities for a very long time, and roofs have been generally holding up. But we're also talking about specific types of roofs that have a shelf life and get replaced. So down the road, if there's an opportunity to get, full ice barrier coverage by a local contractor that's going to be replacing that roof, and it's the right thing to do, I think we can trust it'll be done. The other thing to keep in mind about that is that we're also talking about roofs in higher elevations in places where they're probably going to have to address things with the Wildfire Resiliency Code or some version thereof, right? And that also complicates things for making sure that you have a Class A assembly for that roof and simultaneously the right pairing of materials for what you're going to use, right? Whether that's asphalt shingles or a metal panel system. So I think that this adds a layer of complication that ultimately isn't necessary in order to see what is effectively a compliant roof according to the code. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Andre. Donnie?
Yeah, just real quick. The other concern that we were talking about is when you put 100% ice and water on that roof assembly, you're actually creating a barrier. And you might be, there's a possibility of trapping moisture in that attic space, right? Because you're not allowing it to breathe properly above, not with just the ventilation that's there, but just the current assemblies. You don't have a rubber-based barrier that's covering your entire roof. So the other thing too is this is just a code amendment, not a design criteria requirement. So I would agree that we just maybe hold off on this until we can get some more defined, criteria of what we would say across the board, the same thing. But what you were saying earlier, Sam, we require ice and water shield for all structures, just not 100% of the roof assemblies. Right. So every structure will have an ice and water shield applied, just not 100% of the roof.
Not 100% of the roof, right. Sam, are you good with that if we just leave it the way it is for now?
Yeah, that's what I sort of was saying. I don't think it makes sense for where I am and a lot of people, but not the whole state. And by the way, thanks. I'm going to have to leave this meeting now. I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, for your time today. So let's talk about the second one, and that is the 36-inch venting versus 24 and some other areas. Kind of the same discussion here, I think. And do we leave it the way it is, or do we go to changing, codifying vent terminations at 24 or 36 based on snow heights? Donnie, you still got your hand up?
I do, but it wasn't for this. Sorry, I just forgot to put it down. But I was gonna say I think this would be a pretty good thing to move forward with. It's not that big of a change, and I don't see any cost implications because you're pretty much cutting from the same pipe that you would your normal installation of these units. So I don't see a big issue with this requiring it going to the 36.
And from a manufacturer's perspective, do you think there are any owners that are going to be upset about a 36-inch vent pipe versus a smaller one, just because they don't want to see the extra pipe hanging out? I don't think so, but I just want to make sure our manufacturers have a say in this. Mark, Nate.
The only thing I could see, Sam, is that 36 inches height restrictions on traveling. This is going to have to be an extension that's put on site.
Maybe, right? Yep. Good point. Thank you, Mark. Anybody else have any concerns?
Sean, you have any thoughts on this, Sean?
Yeah, and I think Charlie's on the phone too.
Sean, I was asking about Sean.
Oh, and Sean Roos.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I see is the additional pipe and an elbow is going to shorten your runs on some of those exhaust vents or intakes. But that would be the only thing I would see.
Dean, and then Donnie.
Yeah, looking at this, I totally understand the intent, and what worries me is that we might be oversimplifying a singular product type. This would apply to all modular projects. So if I'm designing, larger multifamily projects or commercial projects that use modular construction, and we, create HVAC courtyards that are well protected, it shouldn't matter what height above grade my exhaust vent terminations are. So I just raised that question because if it's just a single family home, I get that it's probably not a protected courtyard space for those types of things. But we have to think broadly and make sure we're not overly restricting other project types with it.
Thanks, Dean. Donnie?
Yeah, I just thought of something. So I don't think it'd be that hard to implement this, but it also actually limit the type of vent or the exhaust that you can do. If you have to do the candy cane type exhaust, I think how would you move the a flush mounted exhaust for your direct vents on the wall, where it's more like an oval shaped vent that the air blows directly outward and then sucks air in from a small air gap that's around that vent. You would have to make that 36 inches up on that wall instead of where it's typically terminated for all structures. So you would eliminate a alternate way of venting that system if we went down this path.
I heard a couple pros and cons. Any consensus on this one? Tim, you were pro for this from a building department perspective. Is this a hard one for you?
No, we're just actually put an amendment in for the upcoming 2024, which we haven't started enforcing yet, primarily because we are doing a lot more high efficiency appliances, really with our both retrofits, but especially with our new builders. And so we did it this way to take it up to at least a 24-inch for our jurisdiction. And one thing that we looked at closely is, would that be any type of potential impact of getting too close to openable windows? And we felt that the 24, 36 might get you closer, but Donnie raises a good point that I never even thought about with that alternative. So I've got to now look back into that to see what that might kick up. But I'd say, the 36 at this point would be good, or maybe 24, because the code doesn't really give you that specific number. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Don, I see you online. What are your thoughts? Is this a hard one for you, or are you okay if we leave it as it currently is?
There's definitely the option to have them modify the vents on site. So, just because they bring the terminations out at, whatever the manufacturer requires at 12 inches above grade, they may be able to snorkel those up another 2 feet, depending on the manufacturer. But most of them will allow you to raise that combustion air and exhaust intake up on the exterior of the house. It looks kind of goofy. Doesn't look great, but obviously this is a horrible year for me to, justify. But, we have, besides the snow shedding off the roofs and piling up along the side of the house, we also get a lot of drifting and so on. And I have a great example from last year. I got the opportunity to spend the winter in Nebraska, and my parents' high efficiency furnace that they just got installed terminates per code 12 inches off the ground. Well, ground blizzard, It packed snow in the intake and it shut the furnace down. And when you're dealing with 80-year-old people, it's not really prevalent for them to go out and try to dig around in the snow to dig that out and get that cleared. But I knew exactly what was going on. I went out and cleared the vent intake and got that thing going again. So I think it's not only prevalent for our high elevation, but I think it's also something to consider in the Front Range. When you get the high winds and the blizzards, and you got these 2-inch terminations, you guys need to know these systems shut down and do not work. And so if you're not home and you got a blizzard going on and it blocks your terminations and the furnace shuts down and your house freezes up, we're not doing people any favors. So I'm pretty adamant about that. But I also understand it's something that can be modified on site. But these low terminations on these high efficiency furnaces and boilers, you guys just need to be aware you can have significant damage done to your house because it just got packed with snow from blowing wind and it drifted in place.
So thank you, Don. That's a good point. So one of the things we're trying to do is not allow modifications on site so that the manufacturers know exactly what is needed when they get on site and is installed per our design criteria and our approved plans. So are we looking at 24 as an okay number, or do we go with 36, or do we just leave it the way it is? Don, and I heard you that this is pretty important to you. Okay, let's think about it. I'm not hearing a lot of discussion. We'll circle back on this one on the 25th. We've got about 5 minutes left. Let's see if we can knock another one of these two out. Is everybody in support of an amendment to ban unvented gas appliances above 3,000 feet? Because there's not really any place in Colorado that is under 3,000 feet, and they're generally not listed. Is everybody okay with this one? Any discussion? Tracy, I see your suggestion for 30 inches. We'll take a look at that too. Dean, I see your point of when in doubt, leave it out. Did you make that rhyme up all by yourself?
Can't take credit for that one.
Okay. I think everybody's in agreement to this, so we'll write that in. Floor drains required in heater rooms and mechanical rooms with water heaters. And this came from Summit and some suggestions from John McGee allowing indirect waste receptors. This was generally favored. Codes require them to go outside, but when it's cold, it freezes and makes no sense. Does anybody have any thoughts on this one being written into the codes or the rules? Tim, you think yes? Donnie, any thoughts on writing this one in?
No, I think we have something that's similar. It just needs to be modified a little bit.
Okay, we'll go with that. Snow shield barriers, I think we got this to a point where it wasn't supported statewide. Is everybody in agreement of leaving this out? Okay, that's what we'll do. Number 6, refrigerant cool rated cooling shafts. Tim, I think this was yours. And you want to talk about this one a little bit?
I could go over this again. So there was a code change that happened in the 21 where with the introduction of the requirement for the A2L refrigerants, and it incorrectly made it into the 21 to basically require if you penetrate more than, I think it's more than one floor, I forget the exact language, multi-story building, that you'd have to create a fire rated shaft for bringing that refrigerant lines in. So this really only we've seen kick in with these multifamily projects, which whether it's a 2A or 5A metal or wood, you'd have to create a 2-hour shaft that goes through 1-hour walls, and very expensive to do. And so it didn't get fixed in the 2024 IMC, but it is fixed in the 2027 IMC, where it's going to delete that the A2L out of that particular code section to fix that. And the final action hearings are here coming up in a couple of weeks in Cleveland. That particular code change, which was approved unanimously by the IMC Code Development Committee, is on the consensus. So process is, if it's in the consensus package, it's pretty well going to pass. So we chose with Broomfield to just bring that into our 2024 adoption. I'd suggest that that's what the state also does. I don't know how many multifamily, multi-story projects, so it's a limited type of situation, but I think you probably do enough of them that it would be I mean, if you're doing them under the 21 right now, you are supposed to be requiring this. So I just, I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So is everybody okay with amending our 24 code set to align with the future 27 code? Wow, who did the great big thumbs up? Dean, okay, good. All right, we'll do that. 7, we talked about and I know it's 11 o'clock, and if you guys have to drop, I absolutely understand that, but let's rock through a couple of these real quick, and then we're done. Definition of cabin, I think we were in agreement not to accept the definition of a cabin. Everybody okay with that? Okay. HVAC drain lines, there was some discussion here. It was generally positive discussion to consider minimum solid core or other approved materials. This is the last one. Don, I'm sorry, I've missed your hand going up.
Not a problem. I just wanted to backtrack on the commercial buildings with snow guards. So
okay.
if you don't have an amendment, the local jurisdiction cannot require snow guards on commercial or multifamily buildings. That's a big deal up here. I'm sorry. I want to backtrack on that. I want to make sure you understand. I've seen metal roofs go on buildings and all the cars in a complete parking lot crushed in the morning. No one hurt, but I'm just going to tell you that liability is going to go back on the state. If somebody gets killed when the whole roof slides, when somebody walks out in the morning, the whole roof slides and kills somebody or hurts them. That's an important thing in the mountain areas. And,
okay, Don.
I want to make sure that I'm being verbal for all the building officials in Aspen and Vail and all over. If they don't have the ability to force them to put snow guards on these buildings, I'm just making you aware that's a huge liability on your part. And you can even put it in, high snowfall areas, only required in high snowfall areas or whatever. But I think you guys get it. When you got an 8-12 pitch roof and it's metal and we get 4 feet of snow, people get hurt. So,
okay. Don, I don't disagree with you. Let's revisit that on the 25th.
Okay.
Donnie, you got a quick response on that?
Yeah, just I guess for Don, can you give us the standard when we talk about it on the 25th of what these need to be designed to? Because from my recollection of the building code, it doesn't give you a specific requirement of how to do it.
We just could require all roofs over, I believe, 50 square feet that shed onto a public walkway.
I understand that, but how do you actually put the guardrails up? Like, what is the construction standard of how to do that?
We let the contractor. It can either be the clip-on snow guards that are plastic throughout that whole roof section, or you'll see everything all the way up to big metal guards and 6x12 beams on roofs that you see in some of the fancier multifamily structures. We really let them determine what the engineer feels adequate, but they make as simple as the small plastic guards You put those all over that roof system, and they hold that snow in place so it can melt into the gutters and not slide off the roof. I believe I sent you the verbiage, but if you don't have it, I'll send it over to you. What the local amendments are here in Summit County.
Thanks, Don. So we'll talk a little bit about that on the 25th. So again, thank you everybody for your time. Please hold that 10 to 12 meeting on the 25th. I don't think it'll take 2 hours. We're 99% there. We'll have the final discussions there, and then we will file those administrative rules on the 31st of March. Thank you all so much. And if there's, and I apologize for running 4 minutes over. Anybody else have anything? All right, then I'll stop the recording and thank you for your time.